Hey everyone, it's Steve from the garden. Another week has passed since I last fed the worms, so let's do a check-in on our experiment of doing blended food versus pumpkin. And for the coming week, I'm going to do a new experiment when it comes to feeding. So let's take a look. It's been a couple days since I fed the worms, so let's do a quick early check-in to see how much activity we have around the blended food and the pumpkin. Now we fed right here in the middle last time. Let's take a look. There's the beans. Right, way down there is the pumpkin. Alright, so let's flip it over. Boy, this stuff is really soft. Yeah, I don't see a whole lot of activity on the pumpkin currently, but there is one worm, two worms, so there is some activity in there. All right, and let's take a look at the blended food. Definitely got worm activity in that blended food. Oh, yep, blended food definitely has a lot of activity going on. The pumpkin, not so much. So, even though the last feeding, the pumpkin disappeared, sooner, I don't see as much activity this time around on the pumpkin. So, we'll cover this back up, and then we'll do our regular check-in later in the week. Let's check on these worms, see what's going on. So, the paper is moist, but it's still holding together, although you can feel it starting to deteriorate a little bit. And we have a sprout in here. That's probably one of the beans, I'm guessing. Now, when we fed last time, we fed here in the center with pumpkin and then the blended food. So I did an early check-in on both, and the pumpkin had only been barely touched, and the blended food had a lot of worms in it. So let's see where we're at today. I got some more bean sprouts. Got, yep, so those are the beans. You can see the worms are starting to break some of that down. Now with the roots growing in here, that can actually encourage some of the soil biology to increase, which should actually help the worms at that point. But here's where we had the pumpkin, and looks like that pumpkin is pretty much gone. I don't actually see any traces of pumpkin at this point. Let's really dig down. Yep, definitely bean sprouts, huh? Okay, well, we got plenty of worm activity in this area. And this side was the blended food. It doesn't look like there's any trace of that really either. I mean, we got some of the leaves, the leaf mold I kind of put in here. Well, it wasn't leaf mold, it was just dried up leaves. But you can see that material is really breaking down. And a lot of good worm activity in this area. Now, a lot of these worms are probably, pretty young still. So not quite old enough to, start reproducing. But the fact that, we're getting good worm activity and it's breaking down all that food should be pretty promising going forward. So there's no trace of either the pumpkin or the blended food. And this week, I'm going to be doing a different comparison with the blended food versus some unblended food. So this is a piece of wood I threw in last week. Now this, I'm sure, will take quite a while to break down, but it is definitely on the soft side. And it's, it is starting to break down. So I'm going to keep that over here in the bottom. We'll fluff up the rest of this material. And really all this material, all this leaves and compost and everything I have in here, it's really transforming over the short period of time that I've restarted this worm bin. So any of these beans, I'm going to just put here in the center. We'll just bury those. And we'll go on to this week's feeding. So I'm going to put the blended food on this side. And the experiment I'm doing with the blended food versus the non-blended is I measured down 175 grams of food before blending it. And all the food that I'm using this week, all of it was frozen and then thawed out. So that's the blended food over there. And on this side, we will put the unblended food. Now, I did the same mix of food for both the blended and unblended. Again, the unbroken down food or the unblended food was frozen and thawed. So we got some lemon, a little bit of onion skins, some asparagus, some bell pepper. We got potato peels, peas, carrots, some more onion, and there's some little bits of lettuce and broccoli. So let's go ahead and put all that in there. Now I would certainly expect the blended food to get broken down and eaten much faster than the unbroken down food. But that's kind of the experiment for this week. Is we'll go ahead and bury all this. I'm going to go ahead and put the paper back on. I'm going to wet this paper down. With the paper wet it down, we'll continue monitoring this bin as this material all gets converted over to worm castings and I suppose leaf mode. And we'll check in next week. Have a good one, and thanks for watching.